Hey guys, it's JW, and it's Sunday morning. Good morning to all of you. And I just jumped on, as I do most mornings, I jumped on my YouTube timeline to see what's going on, see if there are any new videos or interesting type videos I might want to watch based on the algorithm YouTube has, based on what I usually watch. And I subscribe to quite a few different channels. And of course, YouTube is always suggesting new ones because they know what I like. It's their platform, and they have the right to track what I like, and I don't have a problem with that because oftentimes it's helpful, and sometimes they will recommend someone I find is pretty good, and I tend to follow their channel as well. Sometimes they're way off on. It's almost like they're trying to change my opinion. They'll recommend something that is completely opposite of what I usually watch. But I'm not going to get into any conspiracy theories about that. It's not important anyway. It's in the big picture. It's just not important. I like to watch certain things, and I try to gain some insight from both sides of the. I don't want to say political spectrum because I don't consider myself very political anymore. But from this spectrum of society, I guess it's definitely divided into two camps now. It's divided into what they term the left wing and the right wing camp, and I find more so today, a lot more so today, that people are really wedded to their ideology. Back when I was younger, there were Republicans and Democrats. They never used the term left or right wing. That came about, I don't know, a while back, but they may have used it occasionally, but now it's constant. So you're either back then you were either Republican or Democrat. I grew up in an area of Boston. Boston, the city, is all Democrat. I mean, it's majority Democrat, wide majority. And I grew up in South Boston, which is always has been known as a heavily Democratic ward in the city of Boston. And so, there were times in local elections, I don't think I ever saw, or maybe once I saw a Republican run for representative, but it was all Democrats. So the only interesting part of the election was to vote in the primaries. There's probably, I don't know, half a dozen candidates that would run, and, the same two would always basically come out of the fight. I think back then we only had two representatives. I don't know what they have now. I don't, like I say, I used to follow politics pretty heavily, and I would tune into all the different television channels and radio, talk radio, and not just. I'm a conservative, and, but I would always want to get both sides of the opinion. And I remember back, I don't know, when I first really started getting heavily into talk radio 30, 40 years ago. You'd get even, I'd tune into conservative channels mostly because that was my thought process, my political philosophy, I guess you would call it. And but I'd also want to know what the other side was thinking about and what they were talking about. And so I would tune in sometimes to their shows. And I don't ever remember it being as harsh or critical of the other side as it is today. And that's doesn't matter whether you turn it in left or right. You know, they, they, they all they do is criticize the other side. They really don't, neither side really promotes what they believe in. But they just want to go after the other side. And it's not only off-putting, it's there's no educational value to it whatsoever. I don't ever want to I don't ever want to be in a room that I'm the smartest guy in that room, because then I can learn nothing. I'm not that smart that if I was surrounded by a bunch of people who I was the smartest guy in the room, it would be a pretty weak cast in that room. I mean, I can hold my own basically when it comes to you know discussions and how I my thought process, and I'm a guy who's probably above average intelligence. I mean, but that's not saying much in today's world. I was reading something the other day, forget where, and they said, "Do you realize that the average high school graduate never reads another book the rest of their life once they get out of high school?" Now, if they go on to college, then they will of course be required to read textbooks and stuff. But I'm talking the ones that don't go on to college. Now, the ones that do go on to college, after they graduate from college, I think it's like 80% of them never read another book in their life. So it's it doesn't. It's not a. It's you don't have to work too hard to be above average intelligence. You just got to be basically, fogging up a mirror. And it's basically got to be paying attention a little bit to be above average in today's world. Whereas when I was growing up, I remember just about everybody was aware of the political goings on, and sure, they all had their side of the aisle, if you will, but I don't ever remember the vitriol and the amount of noise that goes on with these elections now. And the media, of course, media has always leaned left. It's just always been that way. If you ask me for an explanation, I really don't have one, other than I guess they feel that the appealing to what's considered people who aren't rich. The majority of people in this country and in the world aren't rich, obviously. But the majority of people in this country work for people who are rich. If you think about it, if the person who owns the business you work for, it probably is on a higher scale economically than you are. It only makes sense. So, you may not like that person because they have more money than you. That's not a very logical or good reason to dislike someone. But I think that's what politics today tries to do, is they try to divide us based on, well, the number of things, but economics certainly is one of them. Race, political affiliation, and your economic structure. So the division, not as it used to be, between rich and poor. Back when I was growing up, it was always the rich. They're trying to steal everything. But like I said, we all worked for rich people, and if we didn't have those rich people, they wouldn't have bought the companies, and we wouldn't have had the job. So it was a dual-edged sword. And a lot of the people who own the businesses, wealthy people, were good, you know, moral, high-standing members of society. So, they weren't bad people. Were some of them bad? Sure. A lot of the people who were poor were bad too. So, it's people pretty much, you find moral and immoral people on both sides for sure. And, but today it's really different. You can't have a political discussion like where I grew up. There were, like I say, about probably 90% Democrats, and I'm not lying on that. That's probably pretty accurate. But there were a couple of neighbors of mine who were Republicans and Protestant. I grew up in South Boston, was probably 99% Catholic at the time. So being a Republican Protestant was like, you know, about as opposite as you could get living in the community I lived in. But so anyway, they were nice people, and all the neighbors liked them. But when we spoke of them, we would refer to them, yeah, Ed, the Protestant guy. Yeah, he lives down the street. Or the Republican, that Republican, he lives down the street. It was an oddity to be anything but a Democrat Catholic. And so it's not, but there was never any anger or vitriol against those people. Everyone liked them. If they were in trouble or they needed neighborly assistance for anything, we were always more than happy to do it for them. And, they had a different belief system than we did, I guess. Although, Protestant, Christian, Catholic, Christian, basically, we have the same values. We weren't sacrificing sheep in the backyard or anything. I mean, we're all they went to church on Sunday and we went to church on Sunday. It's just different times. But yeah, so anyway, I thought I'd jump on, see if there was anything new, and then I get off on a tangent like I usually do. So I'll be back later. I gotta jump off for a few minutes. Okay, so I just had to run outside for a minute. Saw somebody I haven't seen in a while, so I thought I'd just say hello. I could see them through the window where I record my videos. I just look out the window. I'm not being nosy. I can see them clear as day walking by. There's a picture window there. So anyway, just wanted to say hello. And where was I? So anyway, I was talking about the division of politics today versus when I was growing up. And like I said, when I was growing up, people didn't really talk too much about politics. They were interested in politics. Everyone knew about politics, and when when the debates came, everyone was the streets are empty. I mean, it was a big deal. Don't forget, there weren't the communication outlets that there are today. I'm talking when I was a kid, when I first started learning about all of this. I'm talking back in the 50s. I was 10 or 11 years old, and there were only, at the time, I remember when we first started getting a television. We got a television kind of late, but neighbors had it. I mean, this is how, those of you who are under the age of 70 probably can't even relate to what I'm talking about, or 60 maybe. I'm 70. I just turned 79. But yeah, so, there were two TV stations, and Channel 4 and Channel 7, I remember. And then it was a big deal when this third station started, Channel 5. And then, yeah, you had, then these other channels started coming in. I think they were called UHF channels. And you needed a special antenna on your television set in order to bring those signals in. And they were on a different band than the regular VHF. Is it VHF or UHF? I get them mixed up. But they were on a different band than the other main channels. And so they started becoming popular because what they would do is pretty smart business-wise. They would I remember one of the newer channels went after the sports team, so they televised the Red Sox and the Celtics. And so that was a big draw for people to follow their channels. And eventually they became part of the mainstream channels. And most of your local Fox networks started on those types of channels. They weren't called Fox back then, but they turned into that. And the whole media complex became like everything else has become a banking system. And they're pretty much owned by two or three conglomerates. It used to be all these different banks. You'd have, I don't know, 40, 50 different banks you could bank with. Now they might have different local names, but you go in and you'll see they're a subsidiary of a larger bank. So it's just the way the world went. And I guess it had to go that way for the country to grow, and certainly the businesses to grow. It's harder and harder to stay in business as a small business person because, if it's hard to compete against larger businesses. If a Kmart moves into the neighborhood, back then it was a Kmart, now it's a Walmart or one of those big box stores, Costco or BJ's or one of those stores. If they move into your neighborhood, basically local businesses surrounding that neighborhood, they're pretty much out of business because they can't compete with those prices. And as much as people probably would like to support the local neighborhood guy and local merchants, and some people are very good and they pretty much insist on taking care of the guy they know and supporting the guy they know. Most people are always going to go for the best price. And in some cases, they can't. You're paying almost double sometimes. If you go in the corner store versus a high-end box store for an item, you might pay close to double, certainly at least a third more. So, people feel like they're loyal. There's no loyalty anymore, basically. You might, it's now they call them convenience stores, and they are. That's how they survive, based on convenience. If you're driving home and you realize you needed to pick up milk or bread or whatever, and it's 11 o'clock at night, you're gonna head into the 7-Eleven or the local corner store if it's still open, and that's how they stay in business. They're convenient. You're willing to spend the extra money rather than drive out 5 or 10 miles outside to get to a larger supermarket. But when you're doing your weekly grocery shopping, of course, everyone back in the day did their weekly grocery shopping on a Saturday. You'd go to the supermarket other days, but for the most part, that was the day you did your big orders. And everyone, it was like, it was like you planned. First half of your Saturday was planned to grocery shopping. It was a major trek. We didn't have an automobile in my family, so we'd walk up to the supermarket and have like a carriage my mother had. You pull it back and get your bags in there. And then they had, in fact, I did it for a while. They called taking orders. You would stand outside the supermarket and you build yourself a wooden cart, and you'd ask people if you could take their order. And that meant you would wheel their groceries home. They'd be walking alongside of you. And when you got there, they give you a quarter, 50 cents. And sometimes if you did it for a real well-off person, you might get $1 or $2. And so it was a decent way of making extra money if you were a kid. And there was pretty much enough business to go around. The kids, the regulars, the kids who really made a business out of it, they made a lot of money. The rest of us, we'd get the leftovers, someone would feel bad and say, okay, here, kid, take my order. And carry their grocery bags up to their apartment or whatever. And everyone lived in 2 and 3 decker, mostly 3-decker homes where I came from. And so, you'd walk up the stairs and put their groceries in the kitchen for them, and they'd give you a tip. And, worked out well. But like I say, they would put you in a loony bin if you did things like that today. I mean, it's just convenience is everything today. And first of all, nobody walks to the grocery store. Everyone drives. And back where I grew up, I'd say maybe half the neighbors had automobiles, and half didn't. And then as we got older, my parents never had an automobile. More and more people had them than didn't, but it was still probably 25% that didn't drive. And we had public transportation virtually at our door. I mean, we had to walk down about half a block to get to it. But so, yeah, it's just different times now. And are they better times? In some respects, they are. Yeah, I like having modern technology, but there are certain things that have deteriorated, and one of them is the political landscape we are involved in today, which is you can't have a discussion with anyone about politics. If you disagree with them, they're going to come after you. Mostly on the left. The left they're really triggered by Donald Trump, and I'm not a political animal anymore. Like I said, I used to be, and I would get in some pretty heated discussions, but I realized early on that was a mistake. Why get in a heated discussion with someone you actually like just because they're voting for a different person than you are? When I was growing up, some people voted for this guy and other people voted for that guy, and we didn't really talk about it much because we knew that the old adage back then was you don't talk about religion or politics because it's never going to end well. People have their ideologies, and they always think they're right and you're wrong. I think I'm right and I think you're wrong. You think I'm right, you think you're right, and I'm wrong. So, I can understand both sides of the argument, but some of the craziness that goes on today is really quite insidious, I think. I mean, you'll see young people, well, not only young, could be any age really, going into stores in certain communities. Typically, it's in poor neighborhoods, and they just steal things, just grab something and walk out with them. And I think it's California that if it's less than $1,000 or something, you can't even prosecute them. I mean, is that so? I often wonder: is it $1,000 a day, $1,000 per store? I mean, could I take 900 from your store and then go to the store next door and take another 900? I mean, the whole thing is ridiculous. And if you say anything, they'll call you a racist or some other such term. And it's not about race. It's about having a moral compass. I mean, thou shalt not steal is the seventh commandment. And, at least in the parochial school I went to, which was a Catholic parochial school. I know all the Ten Commandments are basically the same, but I noticed early on when I was younger that the Catholics and the Protestants had them in different orders. Like the seventh commandment to a Catholic was thou shalt not steal, and might have been the fifth commandment to a Protestant, whereas the fifth commandment was do not kill. And so anyway, and then there are the platforms that political sides use now that, it's, we're for abortion, women's rights, and, that makes us superior. And if you don't agree with us, you're against women's rights. And whereas if you're a person who considers himself a Christian, then obviously you're pro-life versus pro-choice. Although there are a lot of people who claim to be Christians who are pro-choice, and I don't see how that is possible. The Fifth Commandment states, "Thou shalt not kill." So their argument is, well, it's science claims that it's really not a life, but they keep on expanding regardless of what science says. I have my opinion on it. You have yours, I'm sure, but they keep expanding it to, it used to be you could have an abortion up to the 4th month. Then it went to the 5th, 6th. Now I'm told that, I don't follow this stuff too closely anymore because I find it to be pretty absurd, to be honest with you. And now it's right up to the conception. Now right up to the moment of birth, I guess. You can, that just to me is unbelievable. But anyway, I'm going through the timeline. I normally do play some videos, but I've been rambling here, and I apologize for that. But in the future, I'm going to go on my timeline. I'll show you some of the channels I follow, and some of them are opposite. I might follow something that leans left, and then I'll follow something that leans right, because I like listening. I'm actually amused by it now, the point of view from each side. So anyway, it's just Sunday morning. I had nothing to do, and I thought I'd get on and rant. And so here I am. So thanks for tuning in if you did, and I'll talk to you soon.